INFJs are the world's rarest personality type, but what if I told you their greatest strength is also their greatest danger? Only 1% of the population carries this level of empathy, but empathy cuts both ways. Behind the calm smile is overthinking that never stops. Behind the compassion is exhaustion so deep it borders on collapse. Behind the light, a shadow that no one wants to face. Studies show INFJs are among the most likely to suffer from empathy burnout, toxic relationships, and silent breakdowns. This isn't the romanticized version of the INFJ. This is the dark side. And in the next few minutes, you're going to see truths about yourself or someone you love that you may never unhear.
Imagine an INFJ, introverted, intuitive, feeling, judging friend or partner who is known for their warmth and empathy, suddenly becoming distant or unresponsive. To the outside world, INFJs are often seen as caring, insightful, and gentle people. But behind closed doors, this rare personality type harbors a complex inner life, one filled with intense emotions, private struggles, and paradoxical behaviors that aren't always visible. In this report, we'll shine a light on the lesser-known emotional, psychological, and behavioral patterns of INFJs, including some of their darker tendencies, secret coping mechanisms, and how their communication style can unintentionally impact others. We'll back up these insights with perspectives from personality psychology, like the INFJ's cognitive function stack, Nifei Tai, and real-life reports from INFJs and those who know them. The goal is to help INFJs and the people who love them better understand what's really going on in that enigmatic INFJ heart and mind in an emotionally validating and occasionally humorous way. Under the hood, INFJ cognitive functions and hidden stress reactions. To understand an INFJ's private behaviors, it helps to know how their cognitive function stack works. The INFJ's mind is powered by four main functions: introverted intuition, NE, as the dominant, extroverted feeling, phi as auxiliary, introverted thinking, TI tertiary, and extroverted sensing, SE, as inferior. In everyday life, the Ni-Fei combo makes INFJs future-focused visionaries who deeply care about people's feelings and harmony. Ni gives them big-picture insight, while Fei drives their empathy and their urge to help others. However, when stress, exhaustion, or too much solitude throws this balance off, INFJs can start skipping over their caring Fei and overusing their other functions, leading to some surprising behind-closed-doors behaviors. The Ni-T analysis mode, INFJs under strain often retreat inward, looping between their intuition and thinking while shutting out the outside world. In this Ni-Tai loop, an INFJ becomes uncharacteristically cold, distant, and analytical, living in their head and ignoring their heart. Psychology experts describe INFJs in a Ni-Tai loop as prone to analysis paralysis, cynicism, and self-critical thoughts, often justifying retreating from friends who need them or skipping obligations without much outward emotion. In other words, the usually empathetic INFJ may suddenly seem like a hermit or an aloof analyst behind closed doors, not because they've stopped caring, but because they've temporarily lost access to their warm Fei in favor of brooding Ni and critical TI. The inferior C grip. On the flip side, an INFJ facing extreme or prolonged stress can flip into their inferior extroverted sensing SE in a dramatic way. This is often called an C grip state. Essentially, the INFJ's normal, cautious, future-oriented nature gets overwhelmed, and they start acting impulsively in the moment. In a severe stress episode, an INFJ might suddenly start acting in ways that are surprising, out of character, and impulsive, losing their long-range focus and diving into indulgent sensory behaviors. Think of the straight-laced INFJ suddenly going on a shopping spree, binge-eating an entire pint of ice cream, or even engaging in reckless thrills like driving too fast or spontaneous partying, behaviors their friends would label, "so not you." In these grip moments, for some INFJs, grip stress might manifest as holing up in bed streaming TV and eating junk food. For others, it could be a bold adventure or an uncharacteristic outburst of anger. The common thread is that the INFJ is essentially in survival mode, coping through doing rather than intuiting. It's the INFJ's pressure release valve, but it often kicks in only after they've tried to stay composed for too long. Understanding these internal mechanics, ni fe ti say, helps explain many of the private behaviors we'll explore. When an INFJ's empathy, FE, gets exhausted or their intuition, NI, is overstressed, their hidden sides emerge. They might isolate themselves, emotionally shut down, or act in puzzling ways that loved ones rarely see. Now, let's look at some specific behind closed doors patterns, from ghosting and the famous INFJ door slam to bottled up resentments and paradoxical communication, and the psychology driving them. One of the most infamous INFJ behaviors is something the MBTI community calls the INFJ door slam, essentially an INFJ's ultimate ghosting move. This happens when an INFJ abruptly cuts someone out of their life. One day, you're in their world, the next, you're not. There's no big confrontation, no drawn-out explanation. The INFJ simply vanishes. They stop returning calls and texts, avoid seeing the person, and act as if the relationship never existed. From the outside, this can feel incredibly cruel and confusing to the person left behind, who is often left asking, "What did I do?" Why do INFJs door slam or ghost people, especially when they typically value harmony and kindness? In many cases, it's a defense mechanism born from overwhelm and hurt. INFJs tend to invest deeply in relationships, sometimes too deeply, and often give too much of themselves while ignoring their own needs. If they feel betrayed, exploited, or emotionally drained past their limit, they may see no option but to execute a hard reset. They choose silence and distance. In their mind, this step away is necessary to avoid an ugly conflict or to prevent further hurt on both sides. Example, an INFJ woman described how, after months of feeling taken for granted by a close friend, she simply stopped answering the friend's messages one day. From the friend's perspective, she ghosted without warning. From the INFJ's perspective, she had quietly endured hurt until one more disappointment was the final straw. Rather than risk a confrontation where she might say something harsh, she closed the door for good. It's important to note that INFJs often agonize over doing a door slam. They typically attempt to resolve issues peacefully multiple times before resorting to ghosting. But once that internal line is crossed, the INFJ's demeanor can turn remarkably cold, literally doesn't exist to us anymore, as one INFJ describes it. Beyond the door slam scenario, everyday conflict avoidance is a more routine INFJ pattern. These personalities absolutely loathe open conflict or tension, often going to great lengths to keep the peace. In arguments or stressful interpersonal moments, an INFJ may suddenly clam up, withdraw, or even agree outwardly just to end the confrontation while still hurt or upset internally. This avoidance stems from the INFJ's intense aversion to emotional disharmony and a fear of pain or disharmony if the conflict escalates. Ironically, by avoiding airing out problems, INFJs can let resentments fester. Unaddressed partners or friends may not even realize something was wrong until that resentful explosion or door slam happens much later. In relationships, others might find this conflict avoidance frustrating or puzzling. An INFJ can seem secretive or hard to read about their true feelings. An INFJ might insist, "I'm fine," when they're actually very hurt, hoping to quietly endure it, which leaves others in the dark. Over time, this pattern can create distance in relationships as issues don't get resolved openly. Passive-aggressive communication often goes hand in hand with INFJ conflict aversion. Rather than stating complaints directly, an INFJ might drop subtle hints, use sarcastic humor, or become sullen and unresponsive when upset. They might still do nice things for you, but with an undertone that something's off. This indirect expression is their attempt to release steam without direct confrontation. Of course, most people would prefer a gentle truth over cryptic sarcasm, so loved ones can end up confused or annoyed, unsure what the INFJ really wants or what's bothering them. The INFJ didn't mean to create confusion. In their mind, they're sparing both parties a fight. But this is one example of how an INFJ's coping style can unintentionally affect others. In summary, behind closed doors, INFJs often handle interpersonal strain by shutting people out or shutting down emotionally. Whether it's the dramatic finality of a door slam, ghosting someone to avoid further hurt, or the everyday pattern of sidestepping conflict and dropping off the radar for a while, these behaviors are usually driven by the INFJ's sensitive and idealistic nature, not malice. Understanding this can help those on the receiving end not take it too personally. Easier said than done, of course. We'll discuss later how INFJs might better communicate their need for space or boundaries before it gets to the ghosting stage, and how loved ones can invite an INFJ to open up safely. INFJs are sometimes nicknamed emotional sponges because they absorb the feelings of others so readily. They often play counselor or caretaker in their families and social circles, taking on everyone's problems and emotions, often at the expense of their own energy. Behind their composed exterior, many INFJs are fighting a quiet battle with chronic emotional exhaustion. They may not show it while they're busy being the supportive listener or the peacemaker, but internally they might be inching toward burnout. One common but lesser discussed INFJ experience is empathy burnout, also known as compassion fatigue. Because they continuously absorb the emotions of those around them, INFJs can get emotionally overloaded. Dr. Judith Orloff, an empath researcher, notes that people with strong empathy often internalize the feelings and pain of others and often have trouble distinguishing someone else's discomfort from their own. This describes many INFJs to a T. After weeks or months of supporting others, friends dumping their problems on them, being the mediator in family drama, helping coworkers in crisis, etc., an INFJ might hit a wall of quiet burnout. But instead of visibly snapping, they often shut down emotionally and socially to recover. They might suddenly withdraw from social activities, stop responding promptly, and retreat into solitude to recharge their overtaxed heart. Loved ones of INFJs may notice these periodic disappearances or shutdowns. For example, when a major life change or stress hits, INFJs can become reclusive, tightly wound springs, shutting out family, lovers, and even our closest friends as we try to avoid the inevitable unraveling. During these times, the INFJ might seem okay on the outside. They often hide their panic or despair, but internally, they feel they're barely holding it together. They often don't readily share their own negative emotions with others because they worry they'll be misunderstood or seen as overreacting. This can lead them to feel very alone just when they need support. A sad paradox where an INFJ's own pattern of caring for others makes them believe no one will truly listen and empathize with us. What happens if this INFJ continues to bottle up stress and sorrow without relief? Eventually, the pressure may become too much for even their stoic persona. When the feelings finally explode, it can be cataclysmic. The normally calm, supportive INFJ might suddenly lash out in a burst of anger or tears that seems to come from nowhere. It's often disproportionate, shocking for others because it isn't just that day's frustration, it's months or years of unspoken hurt erupting at once. Friends or partners on the receiving end of an INFJ's emotional meltdown often feel blindsided and hurt, wondering why the INFJ never told them about these issues before. The INFJ, for their part, usually feels immense guilt and regret after such an outburst. They're mortified that they lost control and caused pain. In less dramatic forms, an INFJ shutdown can look like emotional numbness. Under intense overstimulation, say they've been in a noisy, chaotic environment all day or dealing with constant social demands, An INFJ might go into autopilot mode, appearing detached or unresponsive. Research by psychologist Naomi Quink on personality stress reactions found that introverted intuitive types, like INFJs, get provoked by things like crowds, busy environments, interruptions, and people overload. When that happens, they retreat inside themselves and become intolerant of any further intrusions. They may snap at people or just not respond at all. If you've ever seen an INFJ suddenly get very quiet at a loud party or disappear from an event without saying goodbye, this dynamic might be at play. It's not that they hate the people present, it's that their senses and emotions are overstimulated to the breaking point. The safest thing, in their view, is to withdraw immediately and get some quiet, alone time to regain equilibrium. Pushing them to just lighten up and stay in that moment usually backfires. Better to let them recharge and check in later when they've recovered their natural empathy. To summarize, INFJs often deal with overwhelming feelings or burnout by going dark for a while, hibernating in a cocoon of solitude, or in some cases erupting and then isolating. These coping strategies can be hard for outsiders to understand, especially if the INFJ normally seems so emotionally in tune. It helps to remember that the more an INFJ has been too strong for too long, listening to others' problems, acting positive and not expressing their own pain, the more likely a sudden shutdown or blow up becomes. It's like an emotional bank account that's been drained below zero. The check for all that suppressed hurt eventually comes due. Idealism, high expectations, and the seeds of resentment. INFJs are idealists at heart. They carry big visions of how people should be, kind, authentic, striving for their best selves, and how the world could be better. This idealism is beautiful, but it also sets INFJs up for frequent disappointment and internal conflict. One INFJ writer put it this way: "We are idealists and realists in one body, and it's an eternal struggle." They desperately want to see the good in people and situations. That's the idealist part. But their intuitive realism also notices every flaw and wrongdoing all too clearly. Behind closed doors, INFJs often grapple with this paradox. They might have a clear vision of the perfect friend or ideal partner and become quietly critical or withdrawn if the real person falls short of that ideal. Of course, nobody is perfect, but INFJs can struggle to accept that. Their vision of a perfect world and perfect love is so strong that anything less feels painfully out of tune. As one analyst notes, they are dreamers of a perfect world who want the people around them to fit into this bubble. If you've ever had an INFJ boyfriend, girlfriend, or family member silently judge your actions against their moral yardstick, you've likely sensed this. They may not voice the criticism outright, remember conflict avoidance, but you might notice a cooler tone or subtle disappointment from them when you don't do the right thing as they see it. How this idealism can hurt others. Often the INFJ truly means well. Their high expectations come from wanting everyone to be their best, happiest self, but a loved one might experience it as pressure or rejection. For instance, an INFJ might silently resent their partner for not being ambitious enough or for being more self-centered than the INFJ's altruistic ideal. Instead of addressing it constructively, the INFJ might withdraw affection or make passive remarks, leaving the partner feeling confused or not good enough. In some cases, people drift away from the INFJ, sensing an invisible wall of judgment or the fact that the INFJ is secretly disappointed in them. The tragedy is that INFJs deeply value these people, but their own idealism sets a trap that pushes away the very connection they yearn for. Another internal paradox is that INFJs often bottle up negative feelings to avoid hurting others, yet this very habit can lead them to hurt others more when the dam breaks. If someone's behavior repeatedly violates the INFJ's values or trust, the INFJ's mind is storing those facts away, even while they smile and say, "It's fine." This can lead to built-up resentment unbeknownst to the other person. Finally, when the INFJ can't take it anymore, they might unload a long list of grievances or character flaws the person has, utterly catching them off guard. INFJs tend to run conversations in their mind, overanalyze interactions, and create endless what-if scenarios. This overthinking can cause them to misread neutral actions as slights or assign negative intent to a perfectly innocent expression, one analysis explains. You can see how a partner might be baffled. What they thought was a small issue, which the INFJ said was okay, has actually been perceived as part of a larger pattern of offenses in the INFJ's mind. INFJ's intense introspection can thus become a double-edged sword. They see meaning and motive everywhere, which is great when it comes to empathy, but not so great when it leads to misinterpreting their loved one and silently seething. Moreover, INFJs can sometimes slip into a quietly judgmental mode that contradicts their usual empathetic image. They do empathize deeply, but if someone repeatedly violates the INFJ's core values, honesty, kindness, etc., the INFJ may start to view that person through a harsh lens. They might not voice it because they hate confrontation, but the judgment is there and may come out indirectly. For example, an INFJ roommate who values neatness might not yell at their messy housemate, but they'll sigh, move the dishes pointedly, or even leave a passive-aggressive note, expressing subtle, indirect disappointment rather than an open request. The housemate ends up annoyed that the INFJ wouldn't just talk to them and perhaps feels unfairly judged. The INFJ in turn feels frustrated that the housemate doesn't get the hint. It's a cycle that can breed resentment on both sides. Others can get hurt, not because the INFJ wanted to hurt them, but because they felt the INFJ was never satisfied or never truly open about what was wrong. The INFJ might end up with self-inflicted loneliness, wondering why people don't meet them at the same level of devotion or why relationships keep falling short of the fairy tale they envisioned. Part of growing for an INFJ is learning to accept human imperfection in others and themselves and communicate their needs more directly, even if it means engaging in some conflict or admitting to less than ideal feelings. We'll touch more on this in the self-reflection section. Control, independence, and the quiet need for power. Though INFJs are generally gentle souls, they have a steely core when it comes to certain principles, and one of those is a need to feel in control of themselves and their environment. This isn't control in the domineering sense. INFJs rarely bully or boss people outright. It's more subtle and often internally focused. They plan, they prepare, and they hate feeling at the mercy of unpredictable events or emotions. Many INFJs are chronic worst-case scenario planners. They walk into every situation with at least a mental outline of, if X goes wrong, I'll do Y. There aren't many feelings more important for INFJs than being mentally prepared for every outcome. Not being ready for what's coming is a scary thought, one INFJ admits. This hyper-vigilant planning likely comes from their knee, which is always scanning the future, and their past experiences of being blindsided or hurt. Essentially, being prepared, all being in control, and that soothes the INFJ's anxiety. In relationships, this need for control can surface in a few ways: planning and perfectionism. INFJs often want things just so they can be perfectionistic, not only with their work, but also in personal matters, planning the perfect date or trying to orchestrate family events to meet their ideal. While their intentions are good, this can make others feel they're walking on eggshells or that the INFJ is rigid. INFJs also hate wasting time, so they may overschedule or continuously self-improve to feel on top of things. If something or someone threatens to derail their plan, for instance, a friend's last-minute change of plans, the INFJ can become very anxious or quietly irritated. They might not say, "You're messing up my plan," but their stress will show in other ways. Emotional control and empathic power. Interestingly, because INFJs read people so well, they can sometimes slip into a form of manipulation that they themselves don't fully realize. They might subtly steer conversations, give tailored emotional responses, or use their insight into someone's feelings to influence outcomes, all while thinking, "I'm just doing what's best for everyone." An unhealthy INFJ, or one who feels insecure, will use their emotional insight as a weapon in moments of conflict, effectively managing others' behavior under the guise of helping. For example, an INFJ might sense their partner is feeling guilty about something and then lean into that guilt to get a certain reaction. "It's fine, I'll just do this myself. "I know you have more important things," said with a sad smile, effectively making the partner feel even worse and capitulate. Such tactics may not be conscious, but they do indicate the INFJ's need to maintain some power in the situation while avoiding direct confrontation. Others might have a nagging feeling of being managed or manipulated, but can't quite put their finger on it. When confronted, the INFJ is often horrified at the suggestion that they manipulated anyone. In their mind, they were trying to guide things toward harmony or protect the relationship. Nonetheless, this shadow side of INFJ empathy can erode trust if it carries on. Independence and routine control. Many INFJs develop very particular routines or personal habits that they do their way, and woe to anyone who tries to impose on that. Because they give so much of themselves in social or work situations, INFJs fiercely guard certain aspects of their life where they can reclaim control. It might be as simple as a meticulous morning ritual, e.g., wake up, make the same coffee, meditate, journal, and God forbid anyone interrupts this quiet hour. Or it could be how they organize their space. Some INFJs become extremely tidy or have specific places for everything as a way to impose order on a chaotic world. During times of stress, an INFJ may even become obsessed with trivial control. One account noted that an INFJ in a stress grip might become obsessed with cleaning, organizing, or exercising to an extreme degree. It's as if when their inner life feels out of control, they double down on controlling the external details. From the outside, these control-oriented behaviors can be misunderstood. A friend might think the INFJ is being negative or worrying too much when they constantly consider worst-case scenarios, but in fact, the INFJ feels responsible for foreseeing problems their eye can hardly turn off. A partner might feel the INFJ's emotional tactics are passive-aggressive or manipulative, and sometimes they are. But often, the INFJ is driven by fear of losing the relationship or a deeply held value. They tell themselves it's for the greater good. Coworkers might see the INFJ as stubborn or perfectionist about a project, but that's because the INFJ has internally decided what the ideal outcome is and is anxious about any deviation. It can be helpful for others to know that INFJ control issues usually come from anxiety and idealism, not a desire to dominate. Make it a habit to vent or express your emotions in a healthy way before you hit burnout. This could mean journaling your disappointments, talking to a trusted friend or therapist about what's bothering you, or even engaging in a creative outlet, writing, art, music, to let off steam. The key is to not wait until you're at a breaking point. By acknowledging smaller hurts or frustrations as they come, you reduce the chance of that cataclysmic eruption that shocks your loved ones. Remember, expressing a boundary or a need isn't selfish. It prevents bigger problems down the line. Set boundaries. Before you burn out, INFJs often don't realize they're giving too much until they're utterly exhausted. Start tuning in to your own energy levels and practice saying no or not right now before you're running on empty. For example, if you've been everyone's counselor all week and you know you're drained, it's okay to take a night off and reschedule that deep talk for another time. As one INFJ put it, the solution to constant people demand was to set healthy boundaries around my time. True friends will understand if you explain, I need some recharge time, but I care about you and we'll talk soon. Setting small boundaries regularly can prevent the INFJ habit of going full hermit or slamming doors when it all becomes too much. Challenge your idealism with compassion for yourself and others. Yes, the world is far from what it could be, and people, including you, are flawed. When you catch yourself ruminating on how someone should have behaved or how you should have saved the day but failed, pause and practice a bit of acceptance. Not every misstep is a moral failing. Sometimes it's just human nature or circumstance. You can still uphold your values while forgiving imperfections. Remind yourself that holding everyone and yourself to 100% all the time is neither fair nor realistic. By softening your expectations a little, you actually make space for genuine growth and intimacy, because people feel more appreciated and safer around you rather than fearing your silent judgment. Balanced empathy. Know what's yours and what's not. Given your empathic nature, practice distinguishing between your responsibility and others' responsibility. It is not your job to fix everyone's problems, nor to absorb everyone's pain. Remind yourself that saying no to helping sometimes or emotionally distancing when you need to does not make you a bad person. It makes you a healthy one. Also, when you feel compelled to manage a situation behind the scenes, e.g., nudging people subtly to do what you think is best, ask if that's truly necessary or if you're just uncomfortable letting things unfold. Sometimes stepping back and letting others handle their stuff is the best course. It frees you and empowers them. As an INFJ, you'll likely always care deeply. Just remember, caring doesn't mean carrying everything. For those who love or work with an INFJ, here are a few tips to bridge the gap from your side. Don't take sudden withdrawals. Personally, if your INFJ partner or friend goes dark for a day or two or a week after a stressful event, try not to immediately assume they're mad at you or don't care. Often, they are protecting you from their own messy emotions or simply recharging. The best approach is a gentle one. Give them space, but let them know you're there. A message like, "Hey, I noticed you've been quiet. I'm here whenever you feel like talking or if you need anything," is golden. This tells the INFJ they're not being abandoned, yet it doesn't pressure them for an immediate response. Most importantly, avoid guilt-tripping them for needing alone time. That will only make them retreat further. Encourage and reward their openness. If an INFJ does work up the courage to tell you something's bothering them, listen calmly and thank them for sharing. Seriously, even if it's a criticism or a tough topic, recognize how hard it likely was for them to bring it up at all. By responding with patience rather than defensiveness, you reinforce that it's safe for them to be open. That, in turn, means they won't feel as much need to hide things until they explode. Show appreciation for their honesty. "I'm really glad you told me. I know that wasn't easy. Let's figure this out." This kind of response is music to an INFJ's ears and helps break the cycle of avoidance. Reaffirm your affection after conflict. INFJs often dread that a single argument or criticism will permanently damage a relationship. They tend to catastrophize in that way. If you do have a fight or they blow up at you, once things cool down, reach out with reassurance. Even a simple, "We're okay, I care about you," can relieve the huge weight of guilt or fear they carry after an outburst. It doesn't mean excusing bad behavior, but separating the deed from the person. You can dislike that they ghosted you or yelled, yet still love them and want to move forward. Explicitly saying so helps the INFJ come out of hiding and work on repair, rather than silently hating themselves. Gently reality check their interpretations. If you suspect your INFJ friend is reading too much into a situation, e.g., they think a mutual friend is upset with them because of a vague text, help ground them. In a kind way, ask for evidence. Did they say they're upset, or could it be they're just busy? You know how you sometimes worry about the worst case? Offer an alternate, more benign explanation. INFJs can spiral in their own head. An outside perspective can sometimes cut through the fog of overthinking. Just be sure to be supportive, not dismissive of their concerns. The idea is to balance out their nigh-fueled assumptions with a little reality check, not to belittle their intuition, which is often right but not always. Appreciate their depth and lighten them up. Finally, remember that being an INFJ is both a gift and a burden. These individuals are often incredibly compassionate, insightful, and dedicated. They truly want the best for others. Their darker or difficult behaviors usually spring from good intentions gone awry or simply emotional overwhelm. Showing that you value their positive qualities can mean the world to an INFJ who privately worries they're too much or too complicated. At the same time, INFJs often appreciate a partner or friend who can add some levity to their heavy mental world. A bit of gentle humor or spontaneity that respects their introvert need can coax them out of their brooding headspace. They may roll their eyes at your corny joke outwardly, but internally, they're probably grateful for the emotional breather. Learn to communicate your needs openly. This is tough for conflict-averse INFJs, but it's transformative. Start with low-stakes honesty and work your way up. For instance, if a friend's action upset you, instead of swallowing it, find a calm moment and say, "Hey, I know you probably didn't mean it this way, but when X happened, I felt a bit hurt." Frame it with "You're feeling in positive intent, rather than accusation. You might be amazed that instead of a blow-up, you get an apology or a meaningful discussion. Speaking up early about small issues prevents them from snowballing. It also prevents your friends or partner from having to play emotional detective to figure out what's wrong. Direct communication can feel uncomfortable, like an INFJ nightmare. In the end, INFJs, like all personality types, contain multitudes. Behind the friendly counselor and idealistic dreamer, there is a more fragile side, the person who ghosts when they're hurt, who silently judges when values are breached, who melts down after being strong for too long, or who unexpectedly strikes like a cobra when pushed to the brink. These behind closed doors patterns don't make the INFJ any less genuine or caring. They simply show that INFJs are human with a shadow side shaped by the intensity of their nature. The good news is that with self-awareness and understanding from others, those shadows can be managed and even integrated in positive ways. INFJs can learn to break the cycle of bottling up feelings, to set kinder limits for themselves, and to communicate before things reach a crisis. Loved ones can learn not to fear the INFJ's depth, but to meet it with patience and clarity. As one analysis beautifully summarized, knowing about an INFJ's hidden struggles provides the foundation for empathy and patience from their partners and friends, enabling deeper, healthier connections. In other words, when both INFJs and those close to them acknowledge these behind-the-scenes truths, relationships can become even more authentic and supportive. So if you're an INFJ, take heart. Your so-called dark tendencies are understandable and changeable. They are often flip sides of your greatest strengths. And if you love an INFJ, consider yourself fortunate. You have someone in your life who likely understands you more than you know and who will go to great lengths to support you, just maybe not at a loud cocktail party. With open communication, a bit of humor about your differences, and mutual compassion, you can help the INFJ feel safe showing their whole self. And an INFJ who feels truly understood and accepted, that's when their light shines the brightest and those perplexing shadows begin to fade. If this helped, hit subscribe and binge the INFJ series. Next up, 10 things you should never say to an INFJ and INFJs and emotional burnout. And tell me in the comments, what's the hardest part of loving an INFJ? I'll use your stories to build part 2.